Hey everybody. So today we are just going to be going over dockets in Pennsylvania, what they contain, the different types of dockets, just basically any information we can cover. So first we're going to start by looking at UJS portal actually, because you can actually see some of the information contained in dockets on this drop-down menu here. So when searching for dockets, the most popular one we use, of course, is a participant name that searches for the defendant. But there also are some other ones here that is information contained in a docket. For instance, the most common one we use is just the docket number. If we actually pull up a docket here, it's just this long number, always going to be in the top right corner on every page. So that is the docket number. There's also some other things here: police complaint number, police citation number, incident number, the offense tracking number. That's what OTN stands for. And so we're actually going to go ahead and pull up a docket, and we're going to go through it a little bit. I'm actually going to pull up this one right here. So this is a Court of Common Pleas Philadelphia docket. This is their higher trial court. So any felony cases in Philadelphia will end up in the Court of Common Pleas. So we're just going to take it one by one. At the top of just about every docket, you will see the county that it is in. And if we go over here, this is the Court of Common Pleas of Allegheny County. You can see it at the top here. It also say it for municipal court, the county. The only time it doesn't do that is for these magisterial district courts. It just has the district court number. To see what county it's in, you actually have to go down here where it says the county. But going back to original docket, you'll see here we have the docket number. Like I said, it's going to be in the top right of every page. This is the most important number of the case. Anytime we talk to a court, this is the number they want to know. You can also see it says criminal docket here. There are different types of dockets. And let me actually see if I can pull up and just show you kind of a little list of different types of dockets. So here we go, docket types. So the most common one, of course, we deal with in our work is criminal dockets. There are landlord-tenant dockets. There are non-traffic dockets. That's stuff like disorderly conduct, public intoxication. Things are just citations that you would pay tickets for, but aren't necessarily related to traffic. Of course, traffic dockets. So those are the different types of dockets. But of course, the most common one we deal with is a criminal docket. And you'll know something is a criminal docket because the third set of letters, no matter what county it is in, will say CR. So if we look at Allegheny County, we see CR. If we look at the district court, we have CR, municipal court, CR. So it's always going to have CR there. That stands for criminal. And just actually, doing a brief run through of what a docket number contains. The first two letters indicate what court it is in. So you can see here, MC, Municipal Court of Philadelphia, CP, Court of Common Pleas of Philadelphia, MJ, Magisterial District Judge, and here again, for Allegheny County, it's a common pleas. So it's just CP. So CP is the most common one, no matter what county. The next set of numbers is the county code. So this is every county in Pennsylvania has a code, has a number indicating what they are. Philadelphia County is number 51. If we go over here, Allegheny County has number 2. So that's going to be the second set of numbers for the most part. The only exception where the second set of numbers won't be the county code is for the district courts. Again, these are a little weird. So their second set of numbers is actually the court number. So these district courts are all throughout Pennsylvania and the other counties. They're very much scattered, and so they all have this set of numbers, different combinations. So here, if it's a magisterial district court case, although it's in the county of Bucks, it does not have the Bucks County code here. The Bucks County code, just for reference, is 9, but that won't be here. That'll just be the district court number. And we already covered the second set of letters is what kind of docket it is. Next, we have this long number here, typically always starting out with a group of zeros. So this is the actual sort of docket number, we call it a lot of times, because this is the main identifier of the case. So what they do at the beginning of each year is they start at number 1. So that would be the first criminal case. If someone were arrested and arraigned at January 1st at 12:01 a.m., they would have docket number 1, whatever year it is. So the next set of numbers you see is whatever year the case filed in. Now, it's important to know this may be the case it's filed in, the year it's filed in. It is not going to be always the year it is resolved in. Sometimes cases take a couple years, so that's just important to keep in mind. But this case in particular here was case 569 of the year 2022. And it's going to be like that for all the numbers. But you can see here, municipal court will have a much higher number because there are a lot more municipal court cases in Philadelphia than Court of Common Pleas cases. These are felonies. These are misdemeanors. Misdemeanors are much more common. So you can see for misdemeanors, we're up to 12,837 of the year 2022 by the time this case was filed. If we go toward over here to the Magisterial District Court, this is the same thing. This was case number 788 of the year 2022. Allegheny County, same thing. This was case number 13,843 of the year 2011. So that is the docket number. It's pretty simple. So now we're going to scroll down a little bit to this next section. First of all, you can see the case title here, Commonwealth versus, and that'll be the defendant's name. So we're going to scroll down to case information. Here's just going to be a big chunk of identifying information. So you can see right here, it says judge assigned. I wouldn't necessarily go by that when we're looking to send someone information or, try to get in contact with the judge, because we don't know if it's, recently been updated. Now, in this case, it is the right judge. We'll get into that in a little bit, but I wouldn't rely on that too much. It could be mistaken. Here we can see this is the date it was actually filed. So see, the reason it has such a low number is because it was filed pretty early on in the year. An initiation date will almost always be the same as well. Here we can also see, because this is the Court of Common Pleas, this is the higher trial level. You can see there's actually an originating docket number for this case, because for every felony case in Philadelphia, it will always start out in the municipal court. So this defendant had a docket for this case very similar to this one. And this is just saying what the originating docket number was. So for instance, if you ever want to find out what day the preliminary hearing was for one of your client's cases, it's not going to actually be on the Common Pleas docket. You have to pull up the originating docket to see what date that hearing took place. A few other things. So OTN, this is the offense tracking number. That's just another way to identify the case. You can see arresting agency, Philadelphia Police. There's a complaint citation number here as well. And like I said, it's just a lot of sort of identifying information about the case. They have originating docket number, district control number, that's the DC number of the case, police make, and there's originating docket number. Here's an incident number as well. And they even list the arresting officer. So there's a lot of just, sort of identifying information here in this little section right here. And, when we go to other counties, they can be a little differently, angled and everything, but a lot of them include the same information. Here we also see the originating docket number. For this case, we can also see, it says judge assigned, the police involved. They don't list the complaint or citation number, but they do have the incident number. One thing that's also interesting that we will sometimes see, cross-court docket numbers. So what this means is when someone files an appeal, they get a new docket number at the higher court. And sometimes the lower court will just list, what those new docket numbers are. But for right now, like I said, this is just, the case information. Every docket will have one of these, and it'll just be laid out differently each time. But generally, it'll have a lot of the same information. And for, yes, the district courts, the most important thing on this one is the county it's in, because this will be the only place that says what county the case is being held in. So now we're going to move down to status information. This won't always have the most important information on it, where it says like awaiting scheduling conference, awaiting filing information. We're not too worried about that. The only thing I would say in this section that's important is the case status, where it says, if it's an active case. If it's an active case, it means, we're just waiting for the next court date. Everything's, going like usual. Everything's fine. If it says inactive, that means there's a bench warrant for the defendant that they have to resolve before the case will keep moving forward. If it says, and I can actually pull it up here, where it's because we actually on the UJS portal has the different types of case statuses. So active, case is fine, everything's going well. Inactive means bench warrant. Adjudicated means that the person has been convicted, but they haven't yet been sentenced. So you will very rarely see this because it's only, listed as a status for a few months while they're waiting for sentencing. And then, of course, closed just means that the person's been convicted and sentenced. Now, if it's an appeal case, we do look at closed dockets because we're talking about appealing someone who's already been convicted and sentenced. So don't necessarily think if it's closed, it doesn't matter. The next thing on this section is arrest date and complaint date. Arrest date usually being the most important one, talking about when our clients either surrendered themselves or were taken into custody by police. Next is calendar events. This is what we pretty much always are checking nonstop because this just shows their next court date. Not only shows their next court date, shows, their previous calendar, what's kind of happened at the recent date. So in order to really go over this, I'm actually going to start with a municipal court case. And this is actually a bit complicated of a case to go over the calendar with. So we're going to skip through some of this, but I'm going to start with preliminary arraignment. So this is the very first step in the criminal process in Philadelphia. what happens? Person gets taken into custody, then they go before a judge and get assigned bail at the preliminary arraignment. And you can see it happens here in a separate room than what we normally deal with, but it's always pretty much, the day of the arrest. So you can see here, 7/29 is when they had it, and the date of this person's arrest, 7/29. So that's where they assign bail for these cases. And we're going to ignore these statuses because this was just something we did for this particular case. But generally next, what we will see scheduled is the preliminary hearing, the hearing where they determine if the government has enough evidence for the case to move on to trial. After the preliminary hearing, it then gets moved over to the Court of Common Pleas if there is still a felony charge. If it's just misdemeanor charges, then it'll actually stay in this court, stay on this docket, and it'll just be listed for trial. If it has a felony case like this one did, then he gets a formal arraignment and gets a whole new docket, which is a Court of Common Pleas docket. But you can see here, just a lot of this is pretty self-explanatory. This just says the dates of each of these hearings, but you do have to make sure you look over here to the right because it'll tell you whether or not the hearings actually went off that day. So if it says continued, the hearings didn't happen that day. Typically, you're going to look at the last one on the list. So we have 4 statuses here. The 4th one is when the hearing took place. Preliminary hearing, same as well. The second preliminary hearing is when it actually went off. This was the judge at the hearing. This was the date of the hearing, the time, the room. So that's the most important information. And then we're going to go over to Court of Common Pleas real quick. We're still on calendar events. And you can see here, it translates perfectly from the municipal court. So when someone, they get held over for court after the preliminary hearing and they still have a felony case, they get a new docket. And the first hearing they have is a formal arraignment. At this hearing, basically all that happens is the government agrees to pass discovery and the client pleads not guilty and the case moves forward. The next hearing usually is, we'll see scheduling conferences or we'll see pretrial conferences. Generally, no matter what is listed, it's almost always the purpose of the next listing just to get a status of the case where the judge is going to ask, discovery complete. Is there a deal being made? What's going on with the case? And then we will sometimes move on to trial being scheduled. Some dockets, though, it's very annoying. They list things as being trials, but really they're just a status date, which is sometimes the case, and sometimes that'll happen. But like I said, that's kind of the whole calendar event system. Like I said, the main thing you just want to look out for, though, is when something's been continued, because that means nothing really happened that day. The attorney may have just gone in and got a new date, but we can see here when the next date is coming up. So when clients call us, we can just pull up their docket and see this is the next court date. This is the room, this is the time you have to be there, and that's all they need to know. And if we go to district courts and, the courts in the other county, it's the exact same layout. This is a bit of a more complicated one because this is an appeal case we're doing, but you can generally see calendar events are all the same. Oh, and sometimes they will say moved instead of continued. You'll just treat that as the same. Don't worry too much about when they say moved versus continued. So we're going to move on now. That's calendar events. We're going to go now into defendant information. The only real purpose I have of this section is to get the client's date of birth. And you want to check if you can with the client, make sure this is accurate. A majority of the time is, but you never know. You don't have to worry about too much of this other information. If they say aliases, a lot of times it's just different capitalization of the name. So I won't worry too much about that. And you can see here, it's just our client's name. They'll say, kind of where our clients live, their city, but they don't say the exact address. Obviously, that's to protect their safety if they're ever allowed on bail, but that's the defense information. And you can see some counties, they go a bit further. They say, what the sex of the client is, what their race is, but a lot of it's just generally the same information, not too much. Now we're going to move on to case participants. So really, this is mostly seen for cases where, I want to see if there's actually a different one. Yeah, so some counties will list off the different people involved in the case. For the majority of the time, though, it's just going to say who the defendant is. But you can see here in this one district court, they say the arresting officer's name. Sometimes they'll add stuff here. It's really just up to the court where they add it. It's never really too important. Now we're going to scroll down. We get to bail information. This is very important to check up on because it tells us, whether our client is still in custody or whether he's been released. Also tells us what bail he's facing, if it's been modified in any way. So this is a very simple bail information list. You can see here, it just says, his bail was set January 14th, 2022. I'm not sure if that was actually the date of his preliminary arraignment. It most likely was. But you see bail here was set. They said 10% at $50,000, meaning he only had to pay $5,000 to get out. He posted bail same day and was released. So because we see it's posted, we know the client is out. However, please be aware that just because it says posted doesn't always mean they've been released. There could be situations where a person posts their bail and then they pick up new charges. And what we initially, what we do a lot of times is we ask to reinstate bail on the case that they had posted on to $300, just so that they can get credit for any time they spend in jail on this case. So just know that's kind of something you gotta look out for. If someone has multiple, cases, if it says posted on one of them, there's a chance that they're not really out. They're still incarcerated. It's just they posted bail on this one, then got rearrested. And technically, they're free under this case, but they're being detained under another one. So that's just a little bit of a complicated issue, but it's still good to know. I'm going to try to pull up. So this is one that's a bit more of a complicated of a bail. You can see bail initially set 10% at 250,000. Then it got lowered to 10% at 249,000. And then it actually got raised to over $1 million. It really just depends on judges on whether or not they want to change the bail. The government can actually ask to raise bail after a judge has already set it. So it doesn't just go down. It can also go back up depending on how the judge is feeling. So this is one of those cases, and you can see here, bail has not been posted. So we know this person is incarcerated. And actually, this actually brings me to a section that you will not see unless the person is incarcerated, which is confinement history. So if we look at this other docket, that's not here because this person is not confined. Here, though, we do see it where it says he's been confined since, and it's actually in this case, the day of his arrest. They say county correctional facility. That just means a jail. They'll generally always he'll be held in jail pending his case. And they say the facility he's at, which is PIC, Philadelphia Industrial Correctional Facility. And then they say here, still in custody. They don't give too much reason or too much explanation or any information about that. But this still is important to know because this will tell you if someone's incarcerated and what facility they're at. So now we can continue moving on. So we're done with the bail information. The next step, again, another important section. This is probably the most important, is charges. You'll just look at the first 2 words most of the time. Sometimes they add some extra information on here. Be able to look at, what the statute is. So reckless endangerment to another person, aggravated assault, simple assault. The annoying thing with Philadelphia is they actually don't list the gradation on the docket. Now, if we look at the other counties, so this is Bucks County's district court, they list gradation. And I'm not sure. I think also, so Allegheny County also lists gradation. Philadelphia does not, though. So that's a little annoying, but just know, if they're in the court of common pleas, then they do have a felony. Aggravated assault is the felony on this case. These other 2 are misdemeanors. But also, if we look at over to the right here, we see offense date. Offense date is usually the same as the date of arrest, but not in this case. So you can see here, arrest date, January 13th. So he actually was arrested about, 5 or so months after this incident took place. And so that's something we typically ask clients about, like, why is there this, big date missing? And a lot of times it's because they didn't realize they were under arrest. They didn't realize it was an arrest warrant. So we just have to ask them about that. But these are the charges. I don't want to see actually going to Mark Martin. So this is something I kind of want to point out. You'll see here a sequence, and that's what SEQ stands for, just sequence. You can see here there's like numbers missing, and it's kind of all over the place. Generally, the rule that a lot of counties actually have is if you have not been convicted of something, they're going to automatically take it off your record, like your public record. People can still see it if they have access to your secured docket, which is the one that's not available to the public. But here you can see there's numbers missing because it looks like there's some charges he wasn't actually convicted of. So that's why there's kind of this gap. But, when it's a case that's still pending like this one, it's going to show all the charges. It really just depends on whether or not the person has been convicted yet. So now we're going to scroll down to disposition, sentence, and penalties. This one is always a very much of a mess to try and read through because of just the way they have it laid out. But generally, you can see where they kind of list the history of the case. They say the prelim, everything was held for court. They moved on to the next stage. Everything proceeded to court. That's just a lot of what they're going to say. But here, this case is still pending. So that's just all it's going to say. It's just going to say everything's being held for court. Everything's pending. If at the preliminary hearing, a charge got dropped, it would say that here as well. It'd say this charge was withdrawn, but we don't have that here. So we don't have to worry about that. And I'm actually going to go down here because, like I said, this is a docket where someone has been convicted. So you can see here, they have all the normal stuff, held for court, held for court. But then we get here where we see the actual outcome of the case. So this person was found guilty. It'll say how they're found guilty, about jury trial, what day they were found guilty, October 23rd, 2013. And of course, they'll say this is the final ruling. They'll say the charge. They'll say what the outcome was, of course, guilty, the grade, the statute. They'll say the judge, And then right here, the second date is the date of sentencing. So an easy way to remember it, of course, sentencing is always going to be the later of the two dates. So January 29th, 2014, he was sentenced for this charge. And this is why you kind of have to scroll up and down, because you can they're all kind of meant to line up. So this sentencing judge right here lines up with this Eric Pukowski. And you can see this credit for time served lines up here with this number right here. So they're saying he has 103 days credited to his sentence. And they're saying here the start date of his sentence. So a lot of cases, the person immediately is taken into custody and begins serving their sentence. In other cases, they'll have the person surrender at a later date. And then we go down here, they will say the range of sentence, so 10 to 20 years. And they will also, this is very important, they'll say whether it is confinement or probation. They also say, down here at the bottom, just some conditions. And I think it goes on to the next page. Yeah, so it just says defendant stay away and CASA waive. And so it's going to go through each charge. And it's going to explain, all that information, what the sentence they're facing is, what the conditions are. And then as we get more towards the bottom, you'll have this, it'll say linked sentences. This really just tells you whether the sentences are consecutive or concurrent. If they are concurrent, they're serving them at the same time. If they're consecutive, then they have to serve one sentence, then begin serving another. So it looks like all these are consecutive, meaning he would have to, for instance, serve the 5 years under this sentence and then begin serving, his 2 years under this sentence. But that is what a docket looks like when someone has been convicted. Of course, that's not on here because it's an active case still. So we're going to scroll down. The next section on these dockets is attorney information. For the DA in Philadelphia, it's not going to list them because the DA is different for every room. In other counties, sometimes they may list an exact person, but a lot of times it's just going to say the district attorney's office. This is never really helpful. The main thing we look at is the attorney information on the docket, because we're trying to make sure that Lonnie is listed for the docket or whoever the attorney is. And you can see here, if we go down, it says if they're a private attorney, their bar ID number, representation status, if they're actively representing them, their phone number, address of our office, and who we're representing. But and that'll be kind of how it is on every docket. So we're going to scroll down next. We're going to get to one of the last things we focus on, which is entries. We're just back here at entries. And for entries, it's very simple. It's just kind of going through the whole history of the case, what's kind of been going on, the bare bones, if there's any judge's orders, anything like that. So the way it's kind of broken down, this is the main thing you're looking at, just what's happening at this hearing, what's happening on this date, and who said it. So you can see here, information filed. It says Larry Krasner is the one who filed it. He wasn't. It's one of his, DAs, one of his prosecutors, but that's just who they list. Who's entered their appearance. So before us, there was another attorney who entered, named William Montoya. And if we scroll down, a lot of this isn't relevant. It's just notices. And then we can see where we entered our appearance on the case. That can be very important later on to that information. And we want to look at this every once in a while because we need to know, what happened at the last hearing. Because we scroll up to the top here, you can see it says continued on October 24th, but we don't necessarily know why. So sometimes it'll be included here in this section. So you can see here, Commonwealth requested continuance because their victim was unavailable. So that's what we know is the reason for the continuance. And of course, there's no more entry list because we're just waiting for the next court date. And the final thing on a docket is going to be just financial information. It's just going to say how much the defendant owes the court if they're found guilty. They're going to get a bunch of prices added on here that they have to pay. And I can actually pull up, I'm guessing he has a lot of charges because he was found guilty. Yep. So you can see here, and I'm not sure if he's actually paid it all off yet, but you can see here, this is kind of what happens when someone's found guilty. They get a bunch of charges added, and it's for all sorts of things. It's just everywhere. So you can see grand total is like $2,000. So, but that's the case cost. We don't really concern ourselves too much with this. This is more so the client's responsibility to be focused on paying these off. And you can see, like I said, when cases are pending, there's really not much there to focus on. But that is it as far as what's on the dockets. I know that's kind of long and drawn out, but I'm going to actually make a second recording talking about the different types of dockets or the different dockets for each court. But I hope this video helped to just kind of go over what is on docket sheets, and have a good day.